If you were here last week, or if you weren't, we are devoting 3 whole weeks to talk about money. And a fair question is, why? Why are you devoting 3 weeks to talk about money, just almost a week before the most, what people are calling the most important presidential election of our lifetime, and the world's burning and America's about to break into? Like, why are you spending 3 weeks talking about money? All right, it's a fair question. With all the different subjects that we could pull from, why devote 3 weeks to talking about money? Why is not a bad question. Here's a few reasons, all right? Start with the most basic. 1, it's October, okay? And some of us are probably starting to think about Christmas gifts. And statistically, some of us are probably still paying off some of the Christmas gifts that we bought last year, all right? So one reason is that it fits seasonally. If we can help some folks not go in debt over Christmas, that's a plus. Bigger reason is this, all right? We are learning how to handle your finances. And I'm going to say this every week. Learning how to handle your finances will change your life more than anything else outside of your salvation in Christ. Learning how to handle your money instead of letting your money handle you will change your life more than anything out of salvation in Christ. I really believe that. But here's the bigger and the even more important reason that we're talking about money right now. All right, we're all stewards of the resources that God has given to us. We unpacked that a whole lot more in depth last week. If you weren't able to be with us last week for whatever reason, you can find the video on our church YouTube page or the church Facebook page. I don't usually encourage you to go back and watch the past sermons, but I will encourage you to do that if you missed it, because watch that specific one, because everything I'm going to talk about today and next week builds upon the foundation that we laid last week. It really kind of serves to introduce the reason that we're doing this. See, we are all stewards. Talked about that last week, of God's resources. And one day, all right, our master is going to come back. And what's he going to find when he returns and says, hey, I gave you this many talents or whatever. We talked about that parable last week. What did you do with them? What have we done with the resources that he gave us? Were we investing in his kingdom or our own kingdom? Only you can answer that. Like, did we take what he gave us and multiply it? Like the 2 slaves in that parable? Or did we bury it in the ground? Maybe we didn't bury it in the ground, but maybe we did something worse with it. That something worse is kind of what I want to unpack this morning. And before I get into this topic today, let me just say again, all right, I outlined this last week, but there is no mistake with money that yours truly has not made, all right? I have blown more money than you can imagine on stupid things. I've racked up more credit card debt than you can imagine. All right, I've been there. I've done it. I have the receipts to prove it. I don't stand up here as an expert. I want you to know that. I stand up here as someone who was once a fool who God completely changed. All right, like, I'm getting all the financial skeletons out of my own closet so that you can have some hope to maybe bring yours out into the light. See, if he can change me, he can change you. I promise you. I don't care what your story is. I don't care what your situation looks like. If he can change somebody like me, he can change you. If he can change our family, he can change your family. If you allow God to change your worldview when it comes to money, you'll be amazed at what will happen to your finances. Remember, managing money well isn't about being a genius. It's not about being an accountant. It's not even about being good at math, okay? It's about being able to do small things over and over and over again. Remember the 80-20 principle we kind of talked about last week? Like, managing money well is only 20% head knowledge. All right, it's only 20% about what you do. It's 80% about what you know, rather. It's 80% about what you do. Managing money well is much more about what you do than what you know. You can know all of these principles and still be broke. Right, you can know all these principles that we're going to talk about and still not have a clue, and still be like, man, where's all my money going? Why do I always have to keep borrowing money? It's not about what you know, it's about what you do. The 80%, kind of what you do, that's what I want to talk about today. So hypothetically, let's just pretend for a minute that you found yourself right now where I was a little over a year ago when it comes to your finances. Like you're wondering where your hard-earned money is going. Like you're getting a paycheck, every week or every other week or every month. You see it coming in, you got the pay stub, but like there's a week left in the month and you're like, man, where did all this money go? Why do I have no money? I got paid this amount. Where did it go? And maybe you're arguing with your spouse frequently about finances. Money, sex, and in-laws. That's the three things that marriages fight over the most. And money's a huge one. Maybe you and your spouse are just not on the same page when it comes to money. Maybe one's a spender, one's a saver. My wife would be the saver in our family. Okay, I've been the spender. Maybe you're making all these minimum payments on your credit cards or your car payments or whatever they are, and you're just not seeing these balances decrease because you're paying a ton to interest. And then at the end of the month, you're robbing Peter to try to figure out how to pay Paul. And you can't even really think about saving anything. Not really able to give God what's his because, you needed the money for something else. Believe me, I get it. All right? I have been there. I've wrote the book on that. I've written the book on that. I did go to college. And you're just discouraged. You're overwhelmed. And eventually you kind of just get to this point where you just feel almost hopeless. And you think, man, it's always going to be this way. It's been this way for so long. There's no way that it's ever going to get better. But that's where you're wrong. Because it can get better. And if you're willing to work hard, it will get better. There is a way out, all right? If you're discontent with the state of your finances, there is hope. Anybody brave enough to admit that you're discontent with the state of your finances? Man, all right. There's no shame in that, man. The only way you get better is to admit it. So this morning, I want to talk about a four-letter word we don't really talk about in church. There's a lot I could pick from, but I want to talk about the D word. All right? Debt. All right, there's a word we hate. And if the main point of last week's sermon was, hey, we're all stewards of our master's resources and it's our job to manage them well until he returns, main point of today is much more simple. Just three words. And we'll put it on a slide up here. But debt is stupid. All right? It's stupid. And when I say stupid, I don't mean stupid as we usually spell it, like the S-T-U-P-I-D, but stupid. S-T-O-O-P-I-D. All right? I'm spelling it wrong on purpose. And I'll explain it more in a little bit. One reason is it's stupid. It should be spelled wrong. It just makes sense. But we'll get more into that in a little bit. Now, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but we live in this culture where debt is completely normal. Amen? We read some statistics last week about average debt for Americans. Or I read some last week. I'm not going to go over them all again, but it's astounding. Right? I happened to see one statistic from a law firm this week. Showed that at the end of the third quarter of 2019, so just about a year ago, consumer debt across the board for Americans was at $4.144 trillion. That's a whole lot of zeros, all right? That's a whole lot of zeros. Over $4 trillion. That's things like credit cards, that's car loans, that's some student loans. That's an astounding figure. But like I said, in our culture, it's completely normal. It's completely expected that you're going to go into debt. The system is rigged. You want a new car? Hey, go out and get one, man. You can have one in about 10 minutes. As soon as they run your credit, they'll get you in a car as quick as they possibly can. You want to go to college? Hey, here's all these student loans. These colleges have these student loan departments, and they have people who get paid a salary just to help you go into debt so you can pay for school. They're called financial aid advisors. It's like you want something at the store, but you don't have the money right now. Hey, that's okay. There's these little pieces of plastic that you can apply for. And once they give it to you, you can take it to the store and you can swipe it. And they'll let you take it home even if you're broke. And then they'll send you a bill in about a month. But even if you don't have the money then, that's okay because you can make these little payments and they'll just charge a little bit of interest. Debt is normal and it's expected in our culture. But does that mean we should be in debt? Does that mean we have to be in debt? Do we have to fall into those statistics too? And let me say this up front. Most of the debt that I'm going to be talking about this morning is everything besides the house. All right? I'm not going to be talking about your mortgage this morning. We might talk about that later. But So when you hear me say debt, it's things like credit cards, store cards, payday loans, car loans, hospital bills, taxes, you name it. Anything except the mortgage. We know what our culture says about debt. It's normal, it's good, it's expected. You have to go in debt to get a good credit score, and that good credit score is going to determine everything for you. But what I want to see is what I want us to look at this morning is, what does Scripture say about debt? I want to look at a couple of verses that I never really looked at side by side until just recently, to be honest. But first one is Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7. You can turn there, by all means, you can turn there. It'll also be on the screen. It's a really short verse. Here's what it says. Proverbs 22, verse 7. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. You remember how I said debt is stupid, and I spelled it kind of weird? This is why, okay? A borrower literally has to stoop down so that a lender can lord a debt over him. You literally have to stoop down while somebody else rises above you and holds a debt over your head for as long as it takes to get it paid off. This proverb was written by a man named Solomon. He was one of the kings of Israel, the son of King David, and he's the wisest person to ever live. And what does he say about debt? He says that the rich rule over the poor, and that the borrower is a slave of the lender. Like, borrower is what to the lender? Anybody? Slave. Very good. Now, I don't know if you've heard or not, but that slave word is about the most offensive word in our culture right now. And yet Solomon, the wisest person to ever live, says that every time we choose to enter into debt, we are selling ourselves into slavery. Yet we don't often talk about that kind of slavery as being bad. Like, that kind of slavery is acceptable slavery in our culture. Have you ever thought about that? Like, think about that for just a minute. Our culture is all about abolishing slavery. We go into tearing down statues and rewriting laws and changing names of football teams and changing names of musicians and their musical groups. We're all about being against slavery, and yet this kind of slavery isn't even just, normal. It's expected. We're completely fine with being financial slaves. I mean, we operate by taking person after person, and we turn them into slaves of their debt. I mean, we could go on and on, but suffice it to say that according to Scripture, if you are in debt, you're a slave to the lender. We may not like that. That's kind of offensive, but it's hard to argue the truth of what Solomon says. Now, I want you to hang on to that premise there, that a borrower is slave to the lender. How many masters can one slave have? Like, hypothetically, like if you're a slave, how many masters do you have? Somebody say one? Yeah, not a trick question. Yeah, hypothetically speaking, at the end of the day, if you're a slave, you only really have one master that you're obeying, that you're taking orders from. You only have one master that owns you. So I want to take what Solomon said, that borrower slave to the lender, and I want to put it next to some famous words that Jesus says. He said it in Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 19. Again, you can turn there or it'll be on the screen behind me. If you don't have a Bible, grab one from the pew in front of you and you take it home if you don't have one. It's our gift to you today. So Matthew chapter 6, verse 19, here's what it says. It says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body, so if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness?" Now here's the part I kind of want us to focus on. "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. So, according to Solomon, we just read it, a borrower is slave to the lender. Like, we understand that. And according to Jesus, no slave can serve two masters. We understand that. Like, that logically makes sense. We can get on board with that. But that gives us quite the tricky conundrum there. Like, how do you reconcile these two facts? That a borrower is slave to the lender, and then Jesus saying a slave can't serve two masters. Like, how do you reconcile that? Honestly, I've spent the whole week thinking about this. I don't think we can reconcile that. And I think that's the point. Like, I don't think we're supposed to be able to reconcile that. Now, I don't want to spend too long on this, but I want to make this contention that I kind of briefly said last week. But we cannot be good stewards of our master's resources if we've shackled them to various debts all over the place. Like, even if we don't like that, I think we can agree on that. Like, we can't invest in his kingdom if we're too busy paying off our own kingdoms on earth. Now, am I saying that we shouldn't own anything? We should just kind of go off in the hills somewhere and turn into a bunch of ascetics? Like, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm actually saying closer to the opposite. Money's not evil. We talked on that last week. What I'm saying is we have to learn to manage our money so that it doesn't manage us. Biggest reason is because it's not ours. Your money is not a reward that you have. It's a resource. See, we can't be slaves of Jesus and slaves to debt masters at the same time. We can only serve one master at a time. So if we're slaves to debt, the question to ask is, how can we free ourselves so that we can fully be slaves of Jesus? Like, that's what I want to spend the rest of the morning discussing. And we may go a little bit longer. I don't know how this is going to go. Due to scheduling, we had to combine what was initially 5 sermons about money into 3. So this week and next week, you're really getting 2 sermons for the price of 1 each week. So you're welcome. But I encourage you to hear me out, because what we're going to talk about here in just a minute might change the rest of your life. It might change your marriage, and it might change your parenting. I really believe this. So how do we go from being slaves of debt to various debt masters to being full-blown slaves of Jesus? All right, here we go. And again, much of this I'm stealing from Dave Ramsey. I don't think he'll mind. And I can't cover everything this morning, so this is just the bare minimum that we're given. We've got the rest available if you like. We got some resources out on the table out back, or in the back, for when we're done here. But here's what I want to talk about. All right, if you're at the stage that I was, a little over a year ago, and you're like, all right, it's time. I'm tired of being a slave to debt. I can't fully serve Jesus. I can't fully give what I'm supposed to. I can't help people out. I can barely even pay my bills. My money's managing me. I'm not managing it. Like, if that's you, then here are some steps, all right? And again, this is bare minimum. First thing, if you want to go from being a slave to debt to a full slave to Jesus, here's what you have to do. And I know it's scary, all right? But you got to take out all your credit cards, all right? All the Visas, the MasterCards, whatever. I'm not talking about your debit cards. I'm talking about your credit cards. And first thing to do, I'm serious here, your store cards, Kohl's card, Target card, whatever, Walmart card, you get the point. And you take the scissors. This is a Best Buy card I didn't even know I had. Never used it. But this is a Visa card. First thing you got to do, you got to get your cards out, you got to get your scissors out, and you got to cut the things in half. Like, man, it feels good, all right? It feels good. It's also kind of scary, though, because if you're like me, you've trusted in these things for a long time. Like, you didn't have enough money to pay the electric bill. All right, I'm just gonna pay the credit card. I'll take $50 from my check next week, and then I'll put it on there. And then if you're like me, that extra $50 never gets put on there. Like, you've been there, and then like the balance just keeps going up and up. And I don't know if anybody's gonna be brave enough to do this morning, but I want to give the opportunity. Anybody want to cut up a card or two? You can come up here. You can start a chain reaction here. Anybody? Anybody want to be done with credit cards? Want to cut them up? You don't look 18. Don't ever sign up for one, all right? Yes, bring it up. Bring it up right now, yeah. Seriously. But that is truly, seriously, that is the first thing that you need to do. If you want to get out of debt, you can't keep going into debt. All right, that's a logical premise I think we can agree on. Get rid of the credit cards. They should really be called debt cards because that's what they are. And if I can tell the teenagers in here, people about to turn 18, whatever, it's really easy to get a credit card. Don't do it. You don't need a credit card. If you follow what we're going to talk about today and next week, you do not need a credit card. Nobody needs a credit card. They'll say, what about emergencies? No, we'll talk about that. We'll have a plan for that. You do not need a credit card. Take it from somebody who bought into the lie, all right, and wasted a ton of money and kind of hosed over my marriage for a long time. Like, you do not need a credit card. Everybody thinks they're going to be that person who's going to pay it off every month. Statistically, you're not going to be that person. All right, I hate to say that. So cut them up. Get your store cards, get your credit cards, cut them up, even if it's scary. All right. Second thing, and we got a slide here. We talked about the D word. Now we're going to talk about the B word in church. All right. The B word is budget. All right. Who makes a budget? Anybody? Oh, wow. Okay. We got some work to do. Okay. This is important. All right. Get your spouse on board if you are married. You guys need to sit down. You need to get out the bank statements or get on your bank app, whatever. See where you've been spending your money. Tally it up. But before you do any of that, all right, you need to get out a piece of paper and you need to figure out, okay, what are all of our bills? Write them down, every single bill. Figure out, okay, what do we need? So everybody's got to buy food. So budget it. How much are we going to spend on food this month? Figure out how much income you have coming in and then figure out how much you're going to spend. First thing you want to do is prioritize your four walls around you, okay? So if you got debt collectors and everything calling you, whatever, ignore them for this step. You prioritize your four walls. So everything related to your house. So your insurance, your electric bill, your gas bill, whatever, your food, all of that. You prioritize that. You make sure that stuff is paid before anything else. This is from Dave Ramsey. He kind of, I don't know if you can read all of that, but he kind of breaks up different percentages that you should have in your budget. And like he says, charitable giving, so giving to church should comprise 10 to 15% of your income. Housing, 25 to 35%. Utilities, 5 to 10%. Food should be 5 to 15%. Transportation, 10 to 15. You can go on and on. Look to see where you are spending your money, where it's going. All right, for like a lot of us, it's going to restaurants and eating out. This is a point where you think, man, why are we spending $1,500 on groceries every month? Is there a way to do this cheaper? You sit and talk, okay, what are some cheap foods that we can eat? Maybe we get some store brand stuff. Maybe we can figure out a way to get this bill down to figure out how much we can spend, how much we need to be spending. All right? This is also a stage where you cut out all unnecessary spending. If you got, income of $2,000, yet, every month you're about $200 in the red, I'm just throwing out numbers, something's got to give. Maybe we need to get rid of the cable for a while. Maybe we need to get rid of the Netflix. Maybe we need to get rid of, maybe we need to change our internet plan. Maybe we need to change our cell phone plan or something. Figure out where you can cut some money. And then the most important spot is you want to take all of the income that you have coming in and you want to zero out your budget. All right? You don't want to have any money left over in your budget. You want to assign everything a category so that, at the end of the month, you don't have like $100 left over. You're like, oh, the goal is to have money left over, but you don't want to have money left over in your budget that you haven't put somewhere. And I think a lot of times we look at a budget like it's scary, and it's really not. It's actually kind of fun. Like, I never thought I'd enjoy budgeting, but I love kind of sitting down and doing the pie chart and figuring out where the money's going. And it's fun because what you're really doing A lot of times we think a budget is really constricting and like, oh, I don't want to do that. But you're giving yourself permission to spend your money is what you're doing with your budget. You're saying, okay, I can spend $600 on groceries here. I can spend $200 on clothing here. I could spend, $200 on gas this month, for the car. And what you're doing is just you're telling your money where to go instead of letting your money tell you where it went at the end of the month. So first thing you want to do is come up with a budget. But coming up with the budget's not the hard part. You know what the hard part when it comes to the budget is? Yeah, actually sticking to the budget. Anybody been there? You're like, hey, I made a budget, but I didn't stick to it at all. We blew that. You got to stick to it. That's that 80% behavior. That's what we're talking about here. You got to actually stick to it. Easy way to stick to it. I'm guessing we got a couple of different types of people here. Let me talk to the people who don't use their phones for everything for a minute. All right, if you're wanting to a good way to budget, you're wanting to get out of debt, one of the best ways to stick to your budget is take your income and get some envelopes. Envelopes are pretty cheap. And you have an envelope for like every category, that you can pay cash for. You got a groceries envelope. So you go to Walmart, you pay cash for it. You got a clothing envelope. So you go to Kohl's or wherever, you pay cash for it. You want coffee? Hey, $20 a month for coffee, you put it in here. When it's gone, it's gone. You have spending money. Obviously, this is geared towards people who want to go to the store. They're not doing the online stuff all the time. But seriously, budget a set amount of money, put it in an envelope, and guess what? When the money's gone in the envelope, like we're out of money for the month. Like we don't go eat out anymore. We eat ramen noodles for a while. And you'd be amazed at the different ways that you can do up a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. All right, there's peanut butter and jelly sandwich. There's peanut butter and jelly toast. There's peanut butter and jelly tortilla. There's peanut butter and jelly whatever. I feel like Bubba on Forrest Gump. Shrimp and potatoes, shrimp salad, shrimp stew, shrimp gumbo. Anyway, you get the point, all right? You have to stick to it. But if you only want to spend a certain amount, man, this is a surefire way to do it. You tell yourself, hey, I've only got $600 to spend on groceries this month. And when it's gone, it is gone. And you don't use the credit card because it's cut up. All right, you learn to stick to a budget. Now, if you're like me and you use phones for a lot of things, there's this great app called the Every Dollar app. It's by Dave Ramsey. And it does cost something. You can either pay $12.99 a month or you can pay $129 a year, which sounds like a lot, and it is kind of a lot. And it's kind of like, well, I thought we were talking about getting out of debt, not adding another bill. But this app will completely change the way that you handle your money, because you can put your budget in there. You get kind of digital envelopes. It links with your bank account, and it tracks your spending for you so you can see it and you can categorize everything. And it's really helpful. Again, it's called the Every Dollar app. If you're serious about this, download it from your app store. There's a 2-week free trial. I'm on the free trial right now because I wanted to test it out before I talked about it. And it's something that I decided I'm going to pay for because it's worth it. And when you actually invest in something, you pay something for something, you're probably more likely to stick to it. All right. So envelopes, Every Dollar app. They both do the same thing. They're great. I encourage you to do both. So you got your budget. It's time to knock out all your debt, right? No. Before you do anything else, after you get your budget, what you want to do is you want to save $1,000 as quick as you can and put it in an emergency fund. I don't remember what the statistics were last week, but I think it's between half and 75% of Americans have zero money in savings. They live paycheck to paycheck. They have nothing in savings. So the idea with this emergency fund is you make this money as fast as you can. And this is crucial. You depend on this emergency fund where you would have depended on a credit card in the past. You use it, no big deal. Like you got a flat tire, whatever, no big deal. You use that emergency fund, you pay for it with cash instead of the credit card, then you pay yourself back to get your $1,000 back up. Now it's like, man, I thought, I said I can't even save any money. Like, how am I supposed to save $1,000? Like, that's crazy, Brandon. You'd be amazed at how quick you can make $1,000. I mean, have a garage sale. Like sell something on Facebook Marketplace, sell something on eBay. If you got 10 cars in your yard, like maybe sell 9 of them. Like you'd be amazed. We all have stuff that we can sell, all right? Like it's not rocket science. And when you have that money saved, that $1,000, put it in an account somewhere that is easy to get to, but not so easy that you're going to spend it, okay? You want to be able to get to it quick if you need it, but not to spend it. So save $1,000 for emergencies. And a sale at Kohl's is not an emergency, okay? Like a good deal on a TV on Black Friday. Like that's not an emergency as much as I might want to go out and buy it. Okay, so we got the budget, we got the $1,000 emergency fund. How do we pay debt? If we are slaves to debt, how do we pay that off? And, I've subscribed to something, and a lot of people have because it works, but it's called the debt snowball. Anybody ever heard of it? Like, you know what happens with a snowball when you roll it down a hill, right? Like, what happens to it? It keeps getting bigger, and it keeps getting bigger, and it keeps getting bigger. Yeah, but unless it's in Oklahoma where you have like an ice ball. But the snowball, the idea is it starts real small, and it gets bigger. This idea in this step is you pay off all of your debt except for your house using this snowball method. You take your smallest overall debt. So when you did your budget and you wrote down everything that you owe, like you take that list or you make a new one, you say, hey, these are all of the debts that I owe. I owe $100 to mom and dad. I owe $100 to my brother. I owe this hospital bill. I owe this taxes. You take everything, car, student loans, credit cards, taxes, whatever it is. If you owe somebody or something, some corporation money, you write it down. And you write it down in the order of the smallest to the largest, regardless of interest rate. Like we're not teaching math here. We're not doing things that make the most financial sense. What this does is you start paying off that first debt. So say you owed $15 a month on that. You pay that off. Then you take the $15 that you were paying on that debt and you add it to the next minimum payment. Say like you owe $20 on that. You pay the $20 plus the $15, you're paying $35 a month toward this debt. And you keep going and you keep going and you keep going until all your debt is paid off. The idea behind this is that it builds momentum really quick and you see results really quickly. I can testify to that, like anybody else. It's amazing how fast your debt will get paid off if you have the discipline to actually stick to this. And can I just say, it's fun. Like when you start seeing your debt go away and how fast that it's going away, it's fun. You're like, man, I can't wait to get paid this day because $600 is going to this, and then 2 weeks later, $600 is going to this, and like it just goes fast. And it's amazing how fast it really goes. You're like, man, I'm really doing this. And the reason you start with the smallest instead of the biggest, or instead of the one with the biggest interest rate, is because, like I said, momentum starts building really fast early on, and you get really encouraged to see progress, and you keep going. There's more steps after this. This is just, like I said, this is just the very bare minimum when we're talking about budgeting and starting to get out of debt. If you'd like the rest of the steps, I'd love to talk with you and point you to some resources. In fact, I printed out some packets that are on the back table. There is a quick start budgeting packet. It's about 10 pages long. It's stapled together. It's budgeting forms for every income that are probably in this room. Like if you get paid twice a week, there's a form for that. If you get paid once a month, there's a form for that. If you get paid every week, there's a form for that. Like if you have irregular, pay, there's a form for that. And you can just list out all of your stuff on there. It helps you to zero it out. It helps you to put everything in a category. Those are free. I encourage you to take them. Kind of first come, first serve. There's also a debt snowball worksheet back there where you can take it. It's a front and back. And on it tells you what to do. You just list out all your debts like we talked about, smallest to biggest, and how much you're paying, how much you're going to pay, when it's going to get paid off. And it's fun to watch the system work. So please take those. Even more than that, there's a sign-up sheet taped to the table back there and a pen. If you're interested in taking a full-blown Financial Peace University course, it's a 9-week investment. You got to give 9 weeks of your life for like an hour a week or a couple hours a week. But it goes much more in depth than I can do in a 30, 40-minute sermon. So I would encourage you, if we have enough interest in people wanting to do that, I'd love to open it up for the community. So sign up for that if this is something that you'd like to dig deeper in and get some more tools. We would love to host that at the church. So why is all this important, all right? Why am I teaching budgeting in a sermon? Didn't we go to high school for that? It's because of this. We are all stewards of our master's resources. Right? And one day he's coming back. And I don't want all the resources that he's given me to be tied up to various debts. That's really it. He's coming back one day, and I don't want to have to explain why, I owe Visa and Discover and Sally Mae and all these other things. Hey, why did you take my money and put it in debt? I don't want to have to answer that question. I really don't. I can't be fully free to serve Jesus if I'm a slave to a bunch of debt. It's impossible. You cannot be fully free to serve Jesus, to be a slave to Jesus, if you're a slave to all of these debts. The point of all of this, I'll close with this, is so that you and I live like no one else right now. We're willing to look and we're willing to act completely differently. We're willing to spend money completely differently than the rest of our culture. So that later, we're willing to live like no one else right now. So that later, once we're fully complete slaves of Jesus, we can live and give like no one else. We live like no one else right now, so later we can live and give like no one else. We look completely different now, we'll really look completely different later. Can you imagine what it would be like for you in a month if you didn't have your debt? You know what you can do if you don't have any debt? You can do whatever the heck you want. You can do whatever the heck you want. You can help out whoever you want. You can give money wherever you want because it doesn't own you. It doesn't manage you. You've learned how to manage it. Next week, we're going to talk about what the second part of that sentence is. We're living like nobody else right now, so that later we can live and give. Next week, we'll talk about planning. We'll talk about generosity. Talk about some things that we can be giving to and what that looks like when we're not slaves to debt. Will you pray with me? God, thank you.